Hey, it's not rocket science to fast, right? I mean, we just don't eat and we don't drink a whole lot of stuff and we just keep it simple, right? Okay. Where things get more complicated is when you break a fast. And I know you're probably thinking Thomas makes this overly complicated and probably makes it more advanced than it needs to be. But the reality is, if we're not trying to get better all the time, then we're just remaining stagnant. So I like to research, I like to look into this stuff, and I like to share it with you. So now we're talking about breaking a fast, specifically when it comes down to fats. What kind of fats are best? What kind of fats are worst with breaking a fast? Well, let me first go out and say, ideally, it should just be lean protein. But some protein is going to have fats along with it, and sometimes you're doing a ketogenic diet and you want to get those fats in. So let's break down what you should avoid at all costs and what you should try to implement if that is the case. Hey, please do hit that red subscribe button. We've got over 2 million subscribers. We are one of the leading intermittent fasting channels, and I would love if you'd hit that subscribe button and join our tribe. And also hit that little bell icon so you can turn on notifications so you never miss our daily educational videos. All right, let's rock and roll. So here's what's going on. When you break a fast, you're going to have a degree of inflammation that occurs. It's fairly natural. It's very natural, okay? Every time we eat, inflammation increases, natural response, okay? Doesn't mean that food is bad, doesn't mean that inflammation is bad. But after you break a fast, you've gone a period of time without eating to the point where when you do eat, the contrast of inflammation is going to be significantly higher, so you'll feel it. Well, what we have to remember is that while we are fasting, we are slowly breaking down our gut layer a little bit, our gut mucosal layer, which is sort of our layer of protection between the nasty bacteria in our gut and our precious bloodstream, right? It's a self-contained, hermetically sealed bacteria, quite literal cesspool that is fine in its own world, but if it leaks into the bloodstream, it's a problem. So when we break our fast, one of the things that we need to be cognizant of is making sure that we do not let what is in that digestive system leach into the bloodstream. And it sounds like it's not even something that would normally occur, but believe it or not, it happens all the time. They're called lipopolysaccharides, and they're components of bacteria that can leak through our intestinal tract because we get little micro tears and little breaks because we have inflammation. Point is, I want to look at some research that shows which fats allow those lipopolysaccharides to get in or encourage them to cross in the bloodstream and which ones do not, okay? So let's start with saturated fat for a second. Largely, saturated fat is fine, okay? We need it for myelination, we need it for the brain, we need it for the nerves, okay? And it's good for a lot of different things, but not right when you break a fast. There was a study that was published in the journal called Health and Disease, okay, and they found that a higher saturated fat content, like 60% saturated fat and higher, ended up triggering an increase in the amount of lipopolysaccharides that went into the bloodstream, okay? Now, what we have to remember here is that after a fast, we already have a spike in inflammation. Well, there's other research that indicates if we have lipopolysaccharides that come into the bloodstream after a fast, the inflammation that's already elevated can elevate 2 times more. So if we can limit the amount of saturated fat after a fast, not only is it going to help that issue, it's also going to potentially help some of the gut distress that comes with it. Because your gut is sensitive, saturated fat takes a longer time to break down. That's probably why it's triggering stress on the gut and that leaches in, right? Okay, let's break it down a little bit more and talk some other fats for a second. MCT oils, I would not usually recommend after a fast. Why? They absorb so fast. They absorb through a mechanism called passive diffusion, where they just absorb right into the bloodstream. They don't go through any real digestion. They don't require pancreatic lipase, which sounds like a good thing because you get rapid absorption, but your gut distress might really end up just throwing a wrench in your day. So I don't really recommend that. Okay, what about omega-6s? Okay, I'm talking about things like walnut oil, soybean oil, canola oil. If you know me, and you probably do, then yeah, that's probably not what you want to be consuming. The reality is though, it does not affect lipopolysaccharides. That's what's weird. Okay, omega-6s are inflammatory in other worlds for sure, but as far as lipopolysaccharides go, they don't seem to have as much of an effect there. Okay, now let's touch over to omega-3s for just a second. Omega-3s seem to suppress the amount of lipopolysaccharides getting into the bloodstream. So let's visualize, back up for 1 second. Okay, you're breaking your fast. Breaking your fast by itself already causes inflammation to go up. Not the end of the world, it's life. You are now at a crossroads. You can control the inflammation where it's at now, cut your losses, Or you could eat more food that's going to trigger more inflammation. I think you know which fork to take, right? The one that's not going to increase your inflammation more. You cut your losses, leave your inflammation where it's at because that's normal. So no saturated fat because that's going to do it. We don't want to have omega-6s because that's going to trigger inflammation in other ways. But then we can actually have omega-3s that stop the lipopolysaccharides from getting into the bloodstream. It doesn't mean that it's going to lessen the inflammation that you already have from your fast, but it's going to stop the leaking. It's going to plug the hole at least, so your boat's not going to continue to sink. Okay, so omega-3s you're going to get from good quality salmon or good quality like grass-fed, grass-finished meat. By the way, I always say if you're looking for good quality meat to break your fast with, my favorite is utilizing ButcherBox. There's a link down below if you want to check them out. I like them because it makes it easy. I don't have to go to the grocery store. I can just get meat delivered right to my doorstep, and it's always grass-fed, always grass-finished, and super, super good stuff. Quite honestly, I think it's just a tremendous bargain. So they're a big supporter of this channel. Go ahead and check them out down below in the description. Again, thank you ButcherBox for sponsoring this content and making sure that this channel stays alive through all these crazy times and everything like that. So check them out down below in the description. Special links, special pricing for anyone that watches my channel down below. But check them out after this video. Let's keep going. And then of course, like I talked about, you want to avoid the MCT oil, okay? Just because that's going to cause a lot of gastric distress. But then there's some other interesting stuff, okay? There's a study that was published in the journal Inflammation, okay? And this found that there's a specific kind of fat called oleanolic acid that seems to actually prevent lipopolysaccharide-induced gut barrier disruption. That simply means that for whatever reason, it's blocking the breakdown of the gut. It's blocking that breakdown. So after a fast, we still have some continual breakdown. Let's say you break your fast, you eat something. That food is going to be abrasive and it's going to continue to break down the gut a little bit more. But this oleanolic acid is going to stop that. Now, where do you find that? Usually olive oil, a little bit in avocado oil. But I'm not a fan of breaking a fast with high amounts of fat anyway. I usually just like lean protein. So the lean protein that I would go for would be one that has the leanest cut of meat possible, that still has a little bit of fat, but making sure like it's grass-fed, grass-finished, so it at least has a higher omega-3 value. But then I might drizzle a tiny bit, like a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons of olive oil, because this research is pretty compelling. Okay, so now I've got like a piece of salmon or a lean piece of steak or a lean piece of good quality chicken, and I've drizzled a little bit of olive oil on it and made it pretty simple. Point is, after a fast, we need to control lipopolysaccharides the best that we possibly can. And I'll go on record and say that probably the best way that you can control that is to limit your carbohydrate consumption after a fast, okay? Despite all the stuff I'm talking about with meat and despite all the stuff I'm talking about with fats, the biggest impact you can make is probably just by reducing the carbohydrate intake right when you break your fast. Anyhow, just wanted to share some interesting research because I'm always trying to advance myself with this as well. I will see you soon. In fact, I'll see you tomorrow.